Okay.
Okay, everybody. Good evening, all. Welcome to the webinar of our international internship. Firstly, before starting our discussions, I'm going to ask permissions for me to moderate this dialogue, these discussions. My name is Muhammad Iksan. I'm the student of Laureate Petroleum University and the president of SPE Student Chapter. Here with us, we have participants from around 7 countries, right? Maybe 7 countries. And also we have the speaker, Mr. Ardian Nengkoda from Saudi Arabia, so from Indonesia. He's right now in Saudi Arabia. The theme of our webinar today is the World Oil and Gas Mega Project, why we are failed and next best practices. Okay, Mr. Ardian Nengkoda, Ph.D. is a highly exceptional professional, an international award winning of 2015 Society of Petroleum Engineers, SPE, regional projects, facilities and constructions, Abu Dhabi, Uni Arab Emirates. And 2014, Gas Processor Association's GPA Annual Technical Conference, San Francisco, San Antonio, Texas. Mr. Ardian is renowned as a world oil field technologist, a game changer with 20 years solid experience in energy industry. So I would like to give directly the word to Mr. Ardian to continue and to start our discussions. Please, Mr. Ardian.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity given by Muhammad Iksan and also from the SPE of Northern Arctic Federal University, SPE Student Chapter. So it's very glad to be here, and then don't be surprised if you can see my daughter in my back because you know her mother is out now, and then I need to take care of her too. And then it's glad to be here with you because I just come back from the traveling. So I manage the project within Saudi Arabia with Saudi Aramco, and then I just arrived yesterday evening, and then quite very hectic, but it's always happy to share the knowledge and then teaching or sharing some useful information to SPE Student Chapter. So the topics that I would like to share to all of you, it's very interesting, right? As you know already that oil and gas for the past 2-3 years, we have a downturn, but I would like to give you, all of you, a positive gesture, an optimistic future based on what we find and face so far. So in particular, today, I would like to share about the lesson learned from the mega project, and then what kind of learning, and then what is the best practices for the future. So be optimistic is very important after all. So I will share maybe around 10 to 11 slides, and then I will be open for you if you have some questions. So feel free to ask, and then I will answer it right away. So let me share to you my presentations. So you can see from here, right, Iksan?
Yes, Mr. We can see clearly.
Yeah, you can see my presentation now, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So here the topic that I would like to share, basically, it's about the oil and gas as general. The outline will be, I will share about oil and gas life cycle of the project, the phase, and then what is the typical of the concept selection, facilities engineering, process design, and value engineering. So why this type of process is very important in a mega project. Let us start with very basic, okay? Why we, you, everywhere around the world still depend on the oil. So of course, we have a pro and cons, right? For some colleagues, they have some concern about the environmental impact and so on. And then we can live alone without oil. So that was not true actually. So our oil and gas industry is really concerned, yes, about the environment. And then in the same time, there is a lot of product being generated and being processed from the oil itself. So in reality, we are contributing to the world, we are contributing to the economics of people, of country, and so on. For example, in your left side, you can see, a cartoon, people riding the bike, right? So in fact, our clothes, our camera, our mobile phone, our, day-to-day life, we still depend on this fossil fuel, fossil oil. And then without oil, it's very difficult, all right? So we cannot live without oil. Next, this is also very funny, a cartoon where I would like you to be aware and then realize that currently, of course, this cartoon explains if the price of the oil is around $36 per barrel, and then you compare with the water, gasoline, milk, soda, premium coffee, wine and vodka, you will have a feeling that the oil price is so cheap. So this is the things where I would like you to understand that the oil price, even with the current situation where the price is around $65 per barrel for the Brent crude, or $61 for WTI, the crude oil price still in the situation where it's cheap. Next, if we look to the detailed world crude oil share, as you know, we have OPEC organization, and then we also have other non-OPEC. So the crude oil share around the world, as you can see from this pie chart, OPEC still dominated, the oil supply. It's around 81% from the 100% of the available crude oil share. And then of course, in your right side, you will see that Saudi Arabia, Russia is one of the biggest oil producer, in the world. This is the presentation where I would like you to be aware where the economics of the project sometimes is depend on the oil price. So as per today, the oil price is around $65 for the Brent crude, and then you will see that around January 2016, almost 2 years ago, the oil price reached at a lowest point. It's almost around $30 per barrel. So as you can see, for the past 2 years now, March 2018, the crude oil price has become at least around $60 to $70 per barrel. So this data show that the new balance of the oil price is around $60 to $70 per barrel. Now, what is the highly likely of the oil price today or next year? So this is the things where everybody are looking for. So if we look to the situation between supply and demand, the oil price will be depend on, right? Of course, there's other factors like geopolitics, like maybe other situation where supply can increase because of the shale oil from the United States. But basically the gaps between the demand and supply is only 1.6 or 1.5 million barrel per day. So it's quite a very tight market, isn't it? So it's very clear that if the demand constant, and then the supply is still high, the oil price will never, go up. So therefore, the oil price is maybe around $60 per barrel. And then the trend of the shale oil outside of North America, for the maybe 5 years ahead is quite unlikely because of the challenge of the shale oil. Therefore, the price predictions, some of the consulting company or oil company have been predicted, like this, will be maybe in the stable price around 60 to 75 US dollar per barrel. And in the long term, let's say, can this oil price reach around 90 US dollar or 100 US dollar per barrel? Maybe unlikely. However, it might happen too, right? Because at the moment, due to low oil price, not many mega projects are there or have been, conducted so far. And then the other finding from some of the analysts say that the long term of oil price, which is below 45 US dollar per barrel, most likely unlikely. Even though, for example, we see together, right, where the electric vehicle are increased, but most likely the long term of the oil, which is less than $45, might not be there. So let us talk about surface oil and gas facilities. As you know, that surface means something where you can see above the ground. It can be Arctic, like a offshore oil projects, or it can be in the desert, like in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Qatar, or it can be in the sea, right, like offshore. So this is to make you aware that surface oil and gas facilities means that any equipment or production facilities which is above the ground. And then let us see together, how this hydrocarbon, crude oil or natural gas is really, useful in the chain of the petrochemical and chemical feedstock. So the fossil fuel will create, after a distillation, it will produce natural gas, ethane, propane, butane, and so on. So this is just to make you aware that at the moment the world still needs crude oil and natural gas as a petrochemical or chemical feedstock. The trend still there, and it's always there because there is no substitute to this type of chemicals. Now let us step back a little bit. BP, British Petroleum or Beyond Petroleum, have made this very interesting graph where the typical oil price or oil project in the Middle East, as you can see by the red color over here, are in the around 30 US dollar per barrel. So to make economic, it should be around 30 US dollar per barrel. So the lifting cost is very, very cheap over here. So for the production cost, typically it's around 40 to 60 or 70 US dollar per barrel. And then for the shale oil, the cost of it is around 70 to 75, while offshore deep water is more expensive. It's around 80. And then for the oil sand, like in Canada or like a Arctic project, at least they expect to have around 80 to 90 US dollar to have a cost in terms of the lifting. So as you can see over here, any mega project is depend on the economics, because you cannot run any business for lose, right? Next. So this is a very interesting fact. Basically, we call project, any project, whether Arctic project or a oil project in the Europe or in Asia or anywhere, the project we call a success if the cost and schedule are less than 25% over budget, and then the facility installed is more than about 80% of the nameplate design capacity or operating design in the first 2 years of operation. So this fact been found by IPA, independent project analysis. This quite very interesting, where we have a feeling that it's very rare. Again, I need to repeat, it's very rare that any oil and gas project always meet the schedule. So it's quite very interesting. But this is the reality, because there is a lot of uncertainty within the life cycle of the project itself. And then there is a lot of uncertainty within the reservoir, right? So the best geology, the best reservoir prediction that we have so far is around 20%. And then this is the other things where I would like to share to you, that the root cause of the oil and gas Mada project delay mainly because of, people and organization. 60%, 65% of the project delay based on the research by the EY, Ernst & Young in 2014 is because of the poor leadership, poor organization. And then the 21% is because of the contracting and procurement, a weakness. And then last, 14% project delay is because of the external factors. These external factors can be, derived from a government issue, project issue, or dispute, something like that, including the economics, actually. And then this slide, it's about oil and gas life cycle. As you know that within the upstream oil and gas life cycle, the business of the oil start with the licensing, then go to, for example, the agreement between the government and the oil company. Then each, entity, they sit together, they sign the contract, and then they start for the exploration. If they're lucky, we will find the oil or gas discovery. Then we start to calculate the reserve. We do the appraisal, right? So whenever it's firm, the economic is firm, and then the plan, the engineering project will start. So we call it project sanction. After that, we go to the development, and then we open the choke. We celebrate the first oil or the first gas, in terms of the production, until the end, we abandon the field. So this is the life cycle where you need to know for the upstream oil and gas. Let us see next is about oil and gas project phase life cycle. Within this graph, the x-axis, as you can see, is the progressing of the project. Start from the concept, scoping, then go to preliminary design, front-end design, and execution. So the y-axis explaining, the influence of the cost with the green line, and then the purple line explaining the complete project in terms of the percentage. So as you can see over here, by the time of the project moving forward, of course, the project are completing 10%, 20%, 50%, up to 100%. And then in the term of the cost itself, the influence over the cost right from the beginning, basically we have a high cost, impact, and over the time, when we start to complete the project, when we start to finishing the construction, execution, and startup and operation, that's the point where we will produce the oil, the hydrocarbon, and we will start to have some NPV or break-even point. And then this is the life cycle of the concept as a best practices where I need you to learn about. So during the concept selection of the project, we need to understand the environment, the location, the market, infrastructure, the economics of the reservoir, and then also including the production sharing contract term between the government and the company. And then the next phase is very important to understand the reservoir and quantify the uncertainty. Why? Because the economics is driver by the how much oil and gas that you have, how big the size of the reservoir is, and then how you would like to deliver to the market. Therefore, understanding the reservoir in terms of the reserve is very important. And then we need to understand also the PVT, the fluid behavior, including the reservoir management strategy. How do you want to lift it, right? If the gas, maybe you have a lot of or enough pressure to deliver it from the reservoir to the surface. And then for the oil, maybe first year you still have some pressure to make it flow. But next term, we need to think about the artificial lift, such as pumping or electrical submersible pump, gas lift, or other methods. Or sometimes we need to think about the water flooding and enhanced oil recovery. The next phase will be the drilling, right? So how do you want to drill the reserve, the oil and gas? So this is something where we need to start to select the concept. Is it better to have batch drilling, or is it better to have a true drilling? Is it better to have vertical wells or horizontal wells, and so on and so on? And then the fourth phase, which is quite very important actually, how we would like to examine and deliver the production network. So if you are in offshore, of course, you will need some, flow line, pipeline, or production, a network and processing facilities and so on. So this is quite very important. And then the last phase of this concept selection is including the commercial analysis. So we need to build economic model to make sure that our projects are meeting our objective. So in terms of the process design, basically everything starts from the reservoir. So first, we have the basis, right? So to be able to design, we need to understand the PVT, the behavior, the reserve, and so on. Then we select what kind of process schematic that fit to remove unnecessary fluid. If we are at a oil reserve or oil production, we need to remove some water. And then if we have gas, we need to remove some S2S, CO2, or water. So that was the thing of the process design parameters where we need to apply during the project. The next, scheme during the process design is the sizing of the equipment. You do not want to design your separation system which is unnecessary or expensive. You would like to be in the proper conditions, during the processing. And then, of course, we need to define the specification of the mechanical equipment. And then together we need to deliver and design our project safe and environment friendly, which is quite very important nowadays. Next, there's an opportunity within the project where we can save our fund or our money. We call this as a value engineering application. So the cost saving opportunity can be started from the early of the design. And then, of course, whenever we are in a startup or production phase, there is no so much flexibility to do something in terms of the designing fit for purpose. So typically we start with the exploration. We call it PDP or a development phase. Then we start with the appraisal or development, select the concept, we call it pre-feed, front-end engineering design, and then after that goes away, you know, to the execution. So the technology selection, process simplification, waste minimization, process reliability, you know, selection is very important within the first, you know, PDP and feed. So this is the things where I would like to share to all of you about where is the weakness, what went wrong, and why we delay. So typically during the mega project, we are dealing with the big scope, start with the engineering, either, you know, this is a typical project where it's quite similar with Arctic. First, we start with the engineering, pre-feed, select the engineering, procurement, construction strategy, and then goes to the detailed design. Then this is the time where something can go wrong. So we started to hire the contractor, we started to hire vendor, supplier, and so on. And then if we are not really following the standard or design that we already agreed before, then if there is something wrong, the impact can be huge or big. So this is the workflow about the interface engineering, and then the weakness is explained by the red splash over there. So what is the conclusion? The takeaway for you, you know, for us in the oil and gas project, basically first, understanding the reservoir types and fluid properties is important. And then second things, you know, thinking about the flow line, gathering system, the flow assurance is very important. And then the third one, oil and gas dehydration, stabilization, that is something where we need to think of. And then together with produced water treatment, water injection strategy, gas handling, artificial lift system. So do we really need this as now, or can we postpone for the secondary and so on? And then don't forget, if we produce the gas, natural gas, we need to be prepared on the downstream customer, because, you know, business of oil and business of the gas is very different. For the oil, of course, it's very easy. Whenever you find oil, you produce it, then you can store it safely, put it in the tank, then you export it or using for the in-house. But for the gas, there is no way that we can store for longer, because the nature of the gas, the characteristic, the properties is very different with the oil. And then, as you know, that the gas is more pressurized, and then it can be dangerous also. So the last thing which is very important basically is interface. So the project must be led by the company, by the E&P company, and then the interface between the E&P company with the contractor or with the vendor is very important to meet, you know, the expected quality standard or safety standard, and also the target of the project delivery. So thank you. So this is the materials where I really wish that everybody can enjoy with. And then feel free to ask some questions if you have. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Иксан, микрофон выключи. Нас не слышно.
Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful presentations. I hope it's going to be useful for us to increase our knowledge also and our experiences before solving the problems of oil and gas. So right now, the participants were given a case that they need to solve actually regarding the project management, how you can we integrated way solve that case in the Barents Sea. So I think it's gonna be useful. Maybe anyone has questions for him, please.
Microphone here. Do you
Hello, sir. Halo, Mr. Mr. Daniel. Oh, Mr.
Hello. Yeah, I'm very sorry. You know, I think the signal is not very clear.
Stop.
Не, это выключить. Hello, Mr. Can you hear us?
Yeah. I can hear it now.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you hear me pretty well or not? So I have questions on what as in Arctic region, and our main theme of our school is Arctic. So I have a question. Which company do you think is best in Arctic, maybe on offshore or anyway? So,
Yeah. Okay. So I think it's very good questions. Thank you. So Arctic exploration and production is very unique because the environment and then the locations too, and then we need to think about how big the reserves are, and then of course there is, you know, recently, as you know, that there is some concern about the environment effect or environment impact. So a typical of the Arctic and offshore is not many oil and gas that has some expertise in developing the Arctic because of the nature of the environment. So for the big player of the exploration and production, typically, of course, Russia, Gazprom is one of the players, and then in Canada, Shell, and also ExxonMobil, Chevron, they are start to look for Arctic development, right? And then for the project, for the engineering company, not many that has some experiences or expertise in Arctic. Some of them is a McDermott, so very popular in developing offshore, and then ENI, Saipem, they also have some expertise in developing offshore. So yeah, you are right. Not many, you know, oil company has an experiences in Arctic because of the challenge in terms of the environment, and then also challenge in the producing this oil and gas, because there's a lot of, you know, flow assurance issue like hydrate, like emulsions, where it's not been easy to be developed, and then especially during full winter, you know, the production has a lot of blockage and shutdown because the fluid cannot be, you know, produced, something like that. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay, if anybody has a question, yes. Maybe Mr. Ardian, to stop the screen sharing so that we can see you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, please. Okay, maybe we are still waiting. I have a question actually. You have decided some, how can I say this? Some interface engineering, and also some steps or parameters that we should pay attention fully before developing a project in place. So my question here is about the productions or project executions in relatively hot temperature. For example, in Sub-Saharan or in Middle East. So,
yeah.
Would you like to say some example or to say some typical parameters that can be implemented or or must be paid attention in Sahara, but it's not working if you are talking about Arctic or if you are talking about productions in Asia Pacific. So,
Yeah.
Simple and typical parameters. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Iksan. That was very good questions. I have a lot of friends from Russia in Saudi Aramco. So when they work in for example, hot temperature like in the Middle East, and then he started to have some, a concern. So typically in the Middle East, right? So in the Middle East and Africa, the hottest temperature during summer, it can reach around 50 degrees C. So it's quite very hot, and then it's quite very challenging when we, install the project, when we start to have an execution, and then when the construction is start, we lay down the pipe, we install the vessel, and so on. It's quite very challenging in hot temperature. So during the execution, of course, in respect to the health and safety, so our organization SPE is really concerned about safety of the people. We stop the work, right? So because somebody can be died, somebody can be dehydrated because of the hot temperature. So the project typically a little bit delay, during summer in Middle East or Africa, and then people need to avoid any dehydration. So during construction phase, when we lay down the pipe, build the vessel, typically we only work for a half day. So we start from the morning to around 11 o'clock. After that, we slow down, we take rest, and then maybe if the project has 2 shifts, 24 hours, we continue again during the night. So that was the characteristic within the Middle East where the hot temperature are there during summer. But for some of us, it's fine. So we need to escape and we need to be chill out a little bit under the AC, and then so far everything okay. However, very interesting finding so far where for our gas system, for our rotating equipment, it's become worn out or getting easy for high temperature, and it's shut down. So some of our production network or facility also cannot work in high temperature. So speaking about that, I think not every one of you knows about it, and then I think it will be very useful later if somewhere, somehow, someday you will work in Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Iran, Iraq, Africa, Algeria, where the temperature is very hot during summer. So the other things during Arctic, because I've been, visited Canada, which is, quite cold also over there. So during the winter, where the temperature is sub-zero, of course, producing, the fluid is very tough, right? For some instance, the crude oil cannot be flow because, low temperature limiting the flow. And then for the gas, there is a chance of the blockage because of the gas hydrate. So sometimes we need to inject, hydrate inhibitor to make sure that the gas, are lean and then not being blocked by the hydrates. And then the other challenge area in the Arctic also the temperature in sub-zero, right? We need to have a good heating. We need to have people protected from the low temperature. And then again, making safe in operation is very important. And then I saw that in Arctic, environment, we need to stop some of the work because of the situation. And then for the Asia, in the Southeast Asia, there's no problem, right? Well, they produce 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 30 days a month with no issue because the temperature almost constant. There is no difference between summer and winter because there is no summer and there is no winter. So the environment is nice. And then typically, of course, there is no impact on the way we are working or the project working. However, within the case of the South, China Sea or in Indonesia, for example, there is a deep water environment where there's a lot of challenge in terms of the construction activities because of this deep water. Sometimes there is a storm, there is a very bad weather, right? So that was also happen in a Gulf of Mexico or in a North Sea or UK offshore. So I think that was each country. There you are right, Iksan, that every continent they have different challenges. Yeah, that's true. That is very true. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the answers, Mr. Do you have any questions, my friends?
Yeah, I just would like to give you an emphasize that I am very active in SPE, in Society of Petroleum Engineers, and then at the moment I am a member of the Energy Information Committee based in Houston, and then in the same time I also a member of the SPE student chapter judge. So congratulations for this event. I'm so happy to see all of the students, active, and then Iksan also lead this among you, and then keep up the good work. I knew that the oil price is not $30 anymore, and then US dollar now is become nice, and then the oil price is in the close of the 60 to 70 US dollar per barrel, and then we hope that there will be more and more projects. And then, yeah, it's very nice to see that, a PE student or petroleum engineering or energy, chemical engineering student still very optimistic towards the future. So well done for this event. And then I will make sure that I give you a good mark for your student chapter because everyone is active and coming to this event today. It's around 6:30 p.m. over here. I don't know what time is it over there?
We have the same time zone.
Oh, really? Okay, good. Yes.
I have one question. One question about the risk, Mr. So would you like to underline at least 3 main risks from the political, economical, or environmental or geological point of view in the place you're working right now? I mean, in the Saudi Arabia, or maybe if you got some more information, maybe you can say the main risk in articles.
Yeah, all right. So as I shared to you already, earlier, around 30 minutes ago, it's very clear that the oil price is depend on the supply and demand, right? So if the supply is high and demand is like this, of course, the price will go down. If the supply like this and the demand little bit high, the oil price will increase. So that was a very basic economic commodity. And then, of course, it's not only supply and demand. We have other parameters, in between, like geopolitics, like, for example, other economics, and so on and so on. So it also creates, the oil price is not balanced. So as you know that actually the current treat nowadays of the crude oil price is the other source of the fuel. So if you look to the bigger picture, the demand of the oil still drive by by the vehicle, for example. So at the moment, as you know, the trend of the electric vehicle is increased, and then it's fine. And then, but of course, there is no other substitute of this crude oil price for the chemicals, right? So a lot of basic chemicals still depend with the crude oil. So I think it's fine. You know, the demand is changed, but for us as a industry professional, oil and gas professional, we need to be optimistic. We need to manage our supply constantly. Why? Because one day, maybe if we do not have any project at all, when the demand is increased, supply is constant, then the price can reach $100 US. Why not? So that was the thing where we try to avoid. So maintaining, you know, this very important. Therefore, of course, each continent, they have a challenge, right? So Saudi Arabia, Middle East, we have, you know, a lot of challenges. And then in Arctic, you know, environmental issue is also a challenge. In let's say like in Asia, where the North Korea issue last time become quite heat with the US, but it's okay, you know, everything can have some, you know, influence on the crude oil price. So I think to be fair with you, I didn't want to talk too much about the politics, about other variables, but basically we have a lot of optimism. So we need to be optimistic where our oil and gas will contribute to the best economy of the world. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Once again. We are very honored to be visited by you online. As you see, what I catch is the main risk right now is economical point of view. So it's the price of oil, because the price of oil really affects the future of us, the future of petroleum industry, and etc. And you also have give us motivation. So we must be optimism. I would like to say a quote from Mary Laureate. He's also scientific like us. He said that optimism is a happiness magnet. If you stay positive, good things, good future, good people will be drawn to you. Thank you so much once again. See you in the future, I hope.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you. All the best for all of you. Thank you, Iksan.
You too, Mister.
Okay, bye-bye.